demands on your software, apps, and reliability are escalating, Coveros is expanding virtual learning and coaching options to help teams learn new skills and to keep initiatives on track. Our engineers and expert instructors share real-world experiences and practical exercises to deliver an interactive online learning experience. Give your team the skills they need right away with private online training and virtual coaching. Get started today at coveros.com/learn.
Good day, everybody. And again, welcome to From Chaos to Successful Distributed Teams. I'm really excited about this webinar. My name is Jeff Payne. I'm the host for this and the moderator. For those of you that don't know me, I've been building and testing software for a long time. We're not going to talk about how long. Johanna and I agreed we're not going to talk about any of that stuff. Mark either. But a long time. I'm currently running a company called Coveros. We're the sponsors and hosts of this webinar series. Now, Coveros is all about helping organizations move to Agile and DevOps, integrate security and testing into that, and enable your teams to be successful. I'm also the technical editor for Agile Connection. If you're familiar with Agile Connection, both Johanna and Mark write for Agile Connection. It's an online community of software professionals. It is free. You can go to agileconnection.com if you want to join in and read, or I love new authors, so you could write for Agile Connection as well. So with that, let me introduce, or let them introduce themselves. Today, I'm very happy to have on the show the authors of From Chaos to Successful Distributed Agile Teams. Mark and Johanna, I'm going to let you all introduce yourself. Johanna, you want to go first?
So I'm known as the pragmatic manager. I've written a whole bunch of books, and let me put in a plug for agileconnection.com. I was the technical editor for 6 or 7 years, a long time. Thank goodness Jeff took that over because I was getting a little tired of it. You know, if you do something long enough, you might get tired of it. He has invigorated the community. It's a great place to write, especially if you're a new writer. Sorry, Jeff, I hope that wasn't a bad thing.
Great.
So start there, because that's you should read and you should write there. Okay, I've written a whole bunch of books, and my most recent books are the Modern Management Made Easy series. In proofing now. Okay, I think that's it. Mark, you take it away.
Thanks, Johanna. So I'm Mark Kilby. I am the Chief Experimentation Officer of K5 Labs. That's my consulting company, where I work with teams, with management, executives on how they can work successfully online. So I was doing this pre-COVID. This is not a pop-up COVID organization. So also, as Johanna mentioned, we and Jeff mentioned, we co-authored From Chaos to Successful Distributed Agile Teams. And yes, we wish we had picked a shorter title, but you know, there it is. But I also wanted to add, I've written for a number of publications, including Agile Connection, and I just want to plus one to what Johanna said, because Agile Connection was one of the first places I published outside of my blog. And it was a wonderful experience. I published a couple. Actually, Jeff, I have a couple others I might talk to you about. So it's a great community to share information. So don't hold back on that one. Also, not only do I work with companies, but I work with a number of professional organizations. So I co-founded Agile Orlando. I co-founded the Agile Florida Network. So that's encompassed about 6-7 different user groups that banded together to do different events and initiatives together. And now I co-direct the Agile Alliance Community Group Support, which supports Agile meetups worldwide. So that's just the side gig. So, and you can read all about that and the books and articles on my website at markkilby.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Johanna and Mark. Welcome. Glad you're here. You'll see our Twitter handles at the bottom of every slide. So feel free to tweet out during this webinar, or obviously after, or even reach out to us after the webinar is over. So that's a little bit about us. We wanted to poll the audience and learn a little bit about you. I'm going to launch a poll, It has some various roles in it. If you don't see your role, just select other, and you can put in the chat what your role is. Just like to get an idea of who's with us here today. I'm going to end the poll here, and everybody should see the results. Mark, Johanna, any thoughts on what we have here in the audience in relation to the topic that we're talking about?
So that's really interesting. I'm a little concerned that we don't have anybody from operations, security, or DevOps, but I'm really happy that we have development, test, and managers of various leaders, I'll call them.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I think it's good that we have a good mix that I'm seeing across the board, and because this certainly applies to everyone.
Yeah.
What do y'all think about, so drilling into the fact there's no ops, security, DevOps? I mean, obviously, this is only the people online. We had over 250 people register, so many are watching it later, obviously. But is this indicative, though, of, I mean, we always talk about some of the struggles of getting certain roles into our cross-functional teams. I mean, those three stick out to me, right? Because they tend to be, unfortunately, roles that sometimes aren't considered part of the team or haven't been fully integrated into the team. What do you all think about that?
Can I go, Mark?
I know you were dying to go. Go ahead.
Thank you. So yeah, this kind of thing makes me a little bit crazy because you cannot tack operations on to the end. Well, you can, but then you're missing a key part of the Agile team. And if you're not integrating security into, now maybe we have not asked the developers if they integrate security into what they do.
Yeah, they may be covering that. They may be owning ops too, to some extent. Depends on the size.
My clients don't. They're still separate. So we almost have a cross-functional team, and then there's kind of add-ons, right? So we have the add-on for ops, and the add-on for security, and the add-on for anything else that's not just the team. And I see that Pete actually said we do DevSecOps on the Agile teams. Excellent, right. Pete.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mark.
So I would say all of these folks represent parts of the value stream. And if you're missing some of these folks, that means you might be missing some opportunities to make Agile work well, whether they're distributed or not. So Pete, I'm right there with you. Include all of those functionality, those functions together, not handing off as much as you might tend to do, especially in your larger organization. So
our agenda today is, we obviously can't cover the entire book that Johanna and Mark wrote. If we could, it'd be a short book, right? But what we have for you today is Mark and Johanna are going to talk about 3 key aspects. They pulled out of the book 3 things that they really wanted the audience to hear and they really wanted to emphasize. So we're going to be talking about those 3. We're going to time box each of those discussions to be about 10 minutes. As mentioned, we will have time at the end for questions. And after that, we're actually going to head over to the TechWell Hub. We'll talk about what that is later for those of you that are not familiar with it, where we can answer even more of your questions if we do run out of time. So we'll cover those. Then we're going to do a poll and ask you a little bit about your distributed team and how you structure work and things like that. And then we'll do our Q&A. So let's jump right into the first aspect, the first principle of distributed work that you all wanted to talk about. Go ahead and take it away, Johanna and Mark.
All right, you want me to go ahead and jump in on this one?
Yeah.
So most people, when they first dive into distributed teams, or in this case, these days, got forced into distributed teams, worry about time. So with those that were far dispersed, they're worried about time zones. But even though those of us that might be working with teams in the same time zone, there's still this shift that we've undergone now, because some of us are homeschooling and some of us are dealing with other things at home. Hopefully not sick relatives, but that's part of having the family at home and working at home. So this picture you see in front of you is an example of one team, and you'll notice they span 3 cities. And there's some interesting elements to this. So you see Dave his role kind of spans this team and a couple other responsibilities. I'll leave it at that. And he tends to schedule those other responsibilities later in the day. That's why you see those 2 yellow boxes for Dave toward the end of his day. And for Polly is our product owner, and she schedules her calls in the middle of the day, trying to get her customers, trying to touch base with customers and partners, and trying to knock those out, which sounds sensible. You might notice some other things about this chart is that, as most people will, some come in a little bit earlier, some come in later, some have a very short lunch, some have a longer lunch. And when you look at how does all their hours of work actually overlap, the hours of overlap, you see that there's only 1, 2, 3 columns that say 100% overlap at the bottom. So those are only really 3 opportunities the entire team can get together. You might also notice on the left-hand column, these folks are all in the Eastern time zone. So they're not that physically distributed, but they have other constraints that pull them away. Johanna, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add to this one.
Only that if you look at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., right, 9 and 15, you can see most of the team is there at that time. So it's not horrible, but it's not ideal. So yeah, so the top image here is exactly what you saw. But once the team started figuring out what their working agreements were for creating more hours of overlap, they actually came up with the daily schedule on the bottom image. So if you look, you can now see that they have 4 hours of overlap from 10 to noon in the morning and from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. They also have a little bit more overlap at the 4 p.m. and less overlap at the 9 a.m. So the idea is if they wanted to pair or swarm or mob, they had more people available at more times. And what we have found in our work with distributed teams, agile or not, that the more the team works together, the better the team's throughput is. You have a lot less waiting, you have a lot fewer handoffs, there's a lot more teamwork that ends up in valuable work. So I should say valuable outcomes. So you might ask, how the heck did this team do it? Well, Polly switched up all of her calls and check-ins and all that kind of customer stuff and outreach that she was doing. She now started it at 9, did it again at 1 in the afternoon, and again at 5. Dave changed some of his external commitments and asked Fred and Sandra to also help with what he would call the team commitments, which is about reviewing resumes, understanding what the team needs. So this is a great way to not have to do, if you're a manager, you don't have to do all the management work yourself. You can involve other members of the team, especially if you have architecture knowledge, as Dave does, so that you want to be able to participate in mobbing with the team. What else have I missed, Mark?
So when we came up with this example, this was, a year and a half, 2 years ago, based on an actual team.
Yes.
So roll that into today's scenario, where as hopefully things settle down with our current situation, people are going to have to make some tough decisions around, do I work in a hybrid remote situation? Do we stay fully distributed? And how do we shift for that? So it could be that you may notice that Dave is not working between noon and 2. So before March, that could have been time for basketball or running or something. Now it could be, he might be helping homeschool. Same for Polly. So it may not be demands within the business. It may be demands of the new remote work setup that they've now had to come up with. So I think we will see some of these scenarios more frequently as people decide, how do we work in these new scenarios, these new ways of working, if we have a hybrid or fully distributed team now permanently?
Can you all comment on, so in the book, one of the things that is a precursor to this discussion about hours of overlap is some statistics and information around the challenges of distributed teams, globally distributed teams, teams that don't have overlapping work. Do you want to comment on some of the struggles in using Agile in those, environments where overlap is very small?
Yes.
Today?
Don't use,
Johanna?
yeah, I have very strong feelings about this, as you can tell. So in the book, we say, if you don't have a minimum of 4 hours of overlap, we just don't see how you can use an Agile approach. And some teams are able to really work with 3 hours and 2 hours of overlap. But oh my goodness, that requires so much ability to communicate during those few hours of overlap.
And actually, I want to jump in here because it was something you said, and I want to amplify, Johanna, earlier. It's not just time for meetings, it's time for collaboration. So it's after a stand-up or something, a few team members might say, hey, let's work on this together so we can knock this out, so we can get this thing done. That's what you want on your Agile team. Sorry, I wanted to emphasize
No, that's perfect. So, and notice that Mark said, knock it out, right? Because one of the things that there are many frameworks, there are many certifications. I will not go off on my rant about that. What most of them require is a form of a stand-up, and that everybody is supposed to somehow come together and replan the next day's work or this day's work, right? Replan and recommit. If you don't have hours of overlap, I don't see how you can recommit. I don't understand what that means. If you're using iterations, what does it mean to start an iteration at a given day or hour and end it at a given day or hour? So you can use flow through almost any team. Mark and I did some research, and we did not find even one example of literal follow the sun that worked in any organization. We met many people who claimed that they did some form of follow the sun, and when we asked more questions, they did not follow the sun. So that's where you're supposed to work from the east to the west, and it's by magic you hand off stuff and it's all works well. Yeah, we did not see that. So while time zones are not the issue, the hours of overlap are the issue, and we had a lot to say about finding. If you really need to find more people, we advocate feature teams in various locations. There are several possibilities: ambassadors, co-pilots, limited time shifting, limited time splitting. There's all kinds of possibilities, but expecting a team to work when some people are supposed to be sleeping and other people are supposed to be awake, we don't buy it.
Yeah, and again, to truly be an Agile team means you have the ability to collaborate. You have those opportunities to collaborate. It's not tag, you're it, I did my part. Just want to clarify that.
That's very tweetable. Somebody please tweet that.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we could talk about this particular subject forever. So we'll take questions from the audience when we get to the end of our principles. But thanks for those thoughts and ideas, Johanna and Mark. Backchannel. Who wants to kick that off and talk about your concept of backchannel?
Oh, I'll jump in on that one. So as we have now all experienced in March and April, there are many tool options, and there's many different ways that we can potentially collaborate, and they're not all 100% reliable. Not even the favorite meeting tool, which we happen to be using right now. Not a dig on them. Nobody is 100% has 100% uptime. Okay, so the idea of this chart is you need to pick your collaboration tools carefully. So there are asynchronous collaboration and there's synchronous collaboration, but really an Agile team will lean more toward those synchronous collaboration capabilities. That's what you see in the red. I'm not going to dive into all of this because we don't have enough time, but leaning more toward the upper right is where an Agile team will tend to go. But because those tools are not always reliable, you've got to have some sort of safety net. That's what the Backchannel is. Now, for the technologies we have right now, it is a chat channel. And it is a dedicated chat channel that the team has and where they have their tacit conversations. So if they're in a meeting, they might have some things they're discussing in the chat channel, just like I responded to Pete here in the webinar as he was agreeing with some things we said. Thank you, Pete. But I am attuned to watching that back channel as a way of how is everyone doing? Does everyone have an audio connection? Can everyone understand where we are, or does anybody need some help? So that back channel helps keep people connected. It also can serve as sort of a secondary form of note-taking. I've seen teams that they'll post parts of their wiki or other internal notes as people are talking through issues in a meeting, say, oh yeah, there's this issue, and then there's this spec. And the thing is, you want to use a separate chat tool as part of that, because for instance, when this meeting's gone, that particular chat disappears with the meeting tool. So if you have it in a separate tool like Slack or like Teams, you have that persistent log of the conversation that's always there for the team to look back at. So I always encourage the team to have that separate back channel available. I also, going back to the reliability part, if they have that separate back channel going and the meeting tool crashes, my teams have in under a minute fired up a different meeting tool and just resumed their meeting. Try to find a conference room that fast. You're not going to be able to do it. But that's what a back channel can do for a distributed team.
Well, and if I can add one thing, when we were writing the book, we wrote as a pair using Google Docs. And there were times when either I was in another country or you were having wind from a hurricane,
Yeah.
and we used our phones as our back channel.
Yeah.
And so we were able to move from one kind of location to another kind of location. And that was just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we found a dedicated chat back channel was necessary just for this one project.
Yeah, that's a great point. So one question I have for you all, I'm just here to tee things up for you all, is when I think team communication and collaboration amongst the team, that must constrict the size of the team, right? I mean, you can't have, 50 people all on the team if you're doing, kind of collaborative things like this. Give us your insight into team, because I know in the book, when I read that, I was like, wow, okay, good to know. I'm going to check those references, but give us your view of what size team does this work, and what do you do when you have a team too big for that? How do you all think about that?
So I would say you can go up to a team of 1 million. No. So I will say this, we tend to favor much smaller teams. So especially for distributed teams that are across multiple time zones, trying to get those hours of overlap aligned properly is a huge headache for not only a manager of the team, but for the team members themselves if they want to do some just ad hoc collaboration. So if you have very small teams, and I'm talking 6 or less, that is the optimal distributed team size. Now, if you have a larger work group collaborating, you would have, for instance, a back channel for each smaller team of 5 or 6, and then you might have an overarching group chat where they're sharing more of the coordination between the teams, just as if you had like a scrum of scrums. But this one goes continuously, and you have that running log of how are the smaller teams collaborating to build the larger product. Johanna, I don't know if there's more there.
Oh God, yes. So I know, what a surprise. So the reason Mark and I really, and we both came to this from our various experience and various research. I have advocated 5 to 7 person teams. For me, the sweet spot is 5 to 6 forever. And the reason is it's really hard to get all the communication paths inside the team if you have more people. My experience says that there's kind of this rule of 9, that once you hit more than 9 people on a team, it's no longer a team. It's not a team of 10. It's a team of 9 and 1 or 8 and 2. And then once you get to more powers of 3, the team fractures. So I saw this in living color back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and O's. I mean, this has been my experience with co-located and dispersed and distributed teams. I have never seen a team of literally 10. I have seen programs where there are 10 people and they come together to each report on their own deliverables, but that's not the same as an interdependent team. So there's a difference between a team and a work group, and a work group can be of almost any size. And yes, work group probably needs a dedicated chat back channel so that I can say to Mark, oh, I discovered this the other day, and then Jeff can chime in and say, oh, and if you add this thing, it works even better, right? Teams and work groups need that kind of communication. But having a team of 50 people, that's not a team. Now, that does not mean that you cannot share a backlog among several feature teams or cross-functional teams, right? You can do any of that. But all those people, they're not a team. And if you have more than 10 people, don't do a stand-up. That's like the worst possible thing. Okay.
Well, and it's not just about the teams, but also the stakeholders. So if your stakeholders are distributed, they're going to need access to this group. So don't have them trying to figure out what the individual teams that are working on it. Instead, have them access that work group level chat and have a working agreement among the teams about what's the agreement around response time and how is that going to rotate amongst the team members. I've seen this with a work group of 50 in the last client I had that worked very well. They were spread across several teams, and they would just rotate who was sort of on call if a salesperson for their product had a question, or if somebody from support had a question. So rather than those stakeholders trying to figure out who's the right person on the team, they just had to know, just ask in this channel, your question will be answered within this X amount of time.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So your third principle, leveraging tools for help. Who's gonna kick us off with this topic?
Oh, I'll start that one. So Johanna and I, when we first started writing the book, the first thing that we chuckled about is the first question we would always get: what's the best tool? And so my response, especially in 2020, became the 3 best tools I've seen are listening, empathy, and patience. Those are your power tools. Those are the ones that are going to make your team successful. So not only managers, not only stakeholders, but team members need to learn how to use these tools, because how many of us have been on an email chain where it just became, just a back and forth battle, and you realize that people were just misinterpreting what was being written. Asynchronous is a terrible place to have a debate. Elevate that to an actual live meeting where you can see people's faces, see their expressions when you say something really strange, and you can see that facial expression. Use all the communication channels we have with body language and facial expressions. Don't do that asynchronously. And as part of that, and I suspect Johanna will say more about this, having the empathy to be in this other person's shoes. So Johanna was the one that talked to me about congruence. I don't know if you want to jump in with that one, Johanna.
Sure. So congruence is when you balance the needs of yourself with the needs of the other and the needs of the context. And what Mark and I saw a lot in manager interactions with distributed and dispersed teams was the managers would kind of blame the people on the teams for not doing their work, instead of listening to understand what were the impediments that prevented people from doing the work. So having empathy with people does not mean that you're a pushover. I practice my empathy every single day. Mark has been very helpful for that. And but I try and figure out what is the balance. Am I placating the other person where I'm forgetting about myself and just thinking of them in the context? Am I blaming them where I forget that the other person is human? Right? Just forget about the people in this conversation. And have I balanced the context? Do we have deliverables that we already committed to as a company for our customers? I am not saying that those commitments were smart. However, if we do have commitments, what does that mean about us in the marketplace? What does that mean? What are the consequences of not meeting those deliverables? And what are all the options we have to manage how other people think about our deliverables? So having empathy with other people in our team, empathy both ways with managers, empathy with our customers or stakeholders, and understanding what that means for us as a business. That, excuse me, to me, that's a really big thing.
And as part of that, or another aspect of that is, if you are in senior management, especially an executive, be careful how you dream out loud. I'll put it that way. So I'll tell you a story. I was working with one client, had a very charismatic CTO, and this was a distributed group, but he was very good at visiting the teams, managing by walking around. So he would pop into team meetings and say, "Hey, I just want to see how you folks are doing. Don't mind me." And of course, because that person was there, they would say, "Well, what do you think?" And one time, the CTO said, "Oh, I really wish we could do X." Guess what the team did? They dropped everything and started building X. He had no intention for them to drop everything, but because of who that person was and their gravitas, so to speak, their persona, they thought, "Oh, that's a command from on top." And they wanted to make sure that, hey, the CTO is always talking to customers. This must be the thing. So you also need to be empathetic with your staff and be very careful how you dream out loud on that one.
That's a good one. And so I'm going to be empathetic to the audience. And I have to ask, all right, you don't have to give specific technologies, but can you give a little bit on the types of capabilities above and beyond these fantastic communication tools that you see good agile teams that are distributed leverage? You have particular ones that you would say, yeah, we often see these kinds of things being successfully used. Is that a good way to put it?
Sure. So So Mark and I use Zoom for writing the book, and a bunch of my clients use Zoom or Teams. And one of the challenges I have seen, especially since everybody is remote, is how do we put the stories in a board? What kind of a board do we need? And I have several of my coaching clients are now not using one of the most famous board tools, boards,
Yeah.
electronic boards, and instead are using a Google Sheet for their board, because now that they're totally dispersed, that they're a nebula team, their flow through the work is not the same as it was before, and they cannot have one line that they can see in the electronic tool. They need to actually expand the box. So I suggested Google Sheets. I think, Mark, you've used Miro or whatever those things are called
Yeah. So
for
one of those
boards.
larger whiteboard
Yeah,
applications. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that as long as you are thinking about what is the purpose of the tool, and is that tool fulfilling its promise to us right now, you will have um, better results with any tool. But I'm very much in favor of experimenting with various tools. I find that most of the tools are very interesting. I spent a workshop a few weeks ago using, was it Miro? Miro, you know, you
Oh,
can tell how much. Yeah.
that one was Mural.
Digital
Yeah.
whiteboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I couldn't figure out how to stop everything from rolling around. I couldn't
Yeah.
figure out how to make the sticky. I'm not an idiot, but in the moment I had trouble with it. So if you want to use a tool, make sure that everybody understands how to learn the tool, because I think that that's really important. Mark, you probably have more useful stuff to
Well,
say.
and probably more than we have time for, but I'll add a couple. Um, so you've heard us mention Miro and Mural. Both are great tools. They're very similar in functionality. Yes, you can do lots of things, and it may not work for everybody. It for the collaboration you have to do, you might want an even simpler tool like a Google Jamboard for doing sticky notes and just doing very simple things. Um, but the thing that I still see groups struggle with is, where do we keep the knowledge? Where do we keep the decisions? How do we make it easy to find? So if we have to, say, pivot our product in some way, how do we backtrack and see, well, why did we make this decision? Some tools are better than others at that. Actually, I saw one recently called Lucid Meetings. I have not used Lucid Meetings, but I just saw a demonstration where they actually will track who was involved in this decision, who captured these notes. So if you're a highly regulated business, that might be an interesting one. If you're a small startup, it's probably too much for you. Okay. So going back to Johanna's point, experiment for what works in your context. Don't just buy a tool because everyone recommends it. Just because it starts with a J or something like that. Don't go there. Think about, what is your team, what do your stakeholders need? And it's really a tool kit, not just a single tool. If you're trying to find one single tool that will handle all your collaborations, get ready for the failure bow is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, we have not seen one single tool. So even just writing the book, which if you think about it, is a really small project. It was just the two of us for the writing. We use Zoom.
We went
We
through a few
actually,
different tools at first, though.
yeah, we did. So I think it's really important to say what works for our team now, and does it still work for our team as we proceed? So I am sure that if I had more time to work with the M tools that I tried to figure out which one was which, that I would learn to love them. But right now, I'm not loving either of them. And that's not because they're not good tools, but they did not fit my needs. And I think that that's really important. Every single team has different needs. So every single team is going to need different tools.
Yeah.
So, and what do you use for a retrospective? I think that that's if you had to think about just one tool, the retrospective, as far as I'm concerned, rules everything. How can you gather data and then decide what to do? And we both recommend Esther and Diana's 5 steps for retrospectives.
That's great. No, thanks. We can definitely consider. Let's continue this conversation on the hub because we are gonna.
We can light up the hub with this one. Yeah.
Dang right, we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are. So first, thanks for the insight on the book. We're going to take questions here in a second. Please order the book if you found this interesting. There's a lot more information in this book. We just touched on a few of the topics in here. I particularly like the discussion around the different types of teams and how you think about stepping back and looking at the structure of your team in terms of, kind of how cohesive is that team really, right? In terms of your ability to collaborate and who you report to really, right? Is it cross-functional or is this person sort of there, but not, they have other people that they have to satisfy, right? Well, let's just leave it at that. But please, definitely, if you're interested, order the book. We do want to poll the audience about what you've heard here today. And as I bring up the poll, would you all comment? One of you mentioned the term working agreements in the context of what we've been discussing here. Can you explain what you mean by a working agreement or working agreements for a distributed team so that the audience gets the right, picks the right thing in the poll?
So every Agile team is supposed to have working agreements. How will we treat meetings? What does done mean? What does sustainable pace mean for us? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that you might have in working agreements. But I think especially since we were not dispersed by choice in March. We got dispersed by mandate. Mark, you have a nice term for that, voluntold.
Voluntold, yeah. We were all voluntold to get out of the office.
Yeah, which is good, right? We need physical safety. And that means that all the agreements you had before are up for discussion again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the poll is, as you've moved to this new dispersed model, have your working agreements changed? Have you taken the time, those participating to change and even review your working agreements and see if they should change, right? Because it sounds like oftentimes they will need to change, particularly if you were co-located, really truly co-located as a team, and now you're one of the other models that you mentioned in your book of a dispersed team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're going to see more shifts in those different models as time goes on.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. Looks like people are still collecting their votes. So we'll give people just a couple more seconds. You should be able to see the poll at this point. Should be up on your screen. If not, check your pop-up blocker. Or in Johanna's case, move one of your windows or whatever she needs to do there.
I did that this time. Yes, I learned. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to end the poll so we can look at the results and see what you all think. All right, here we go.
Good.
So first of all, good. We've got some very proactive people here who have made some changes, which is great, right?
Yeah, I really like the fact that people are experimenting and changing based on what they learned. That's really Every
Agile?
time, right, Mark and I have not yet worked together as consultants. We should try that as an
We
experiment,
should
Mark.
try
Yeah,
that.
you should
Yeah.
try that.
But we advocate this a lot, and it's, I'm not sure why some people, well, I think that 9% of people say we want to, but there's no time. And another 9% say we've talked about it. And I find that a lot of people are so much under pressure that the more pressure they have, the less they can even think about experimenting.
Yeah, and especially in March and April, it
yeah.
it was it was a mad dash just to try to grab some sort of normalcy, and so people were saying, okay, this tool seems to work, let's just go with it, and or let's just try to keep our normal meeting times, and then realizing that it made for a very long day. And then I'm looking at the chat, and Kathy and Peter talk about, well, our teams were already spanned several time zones and nothing really changed much for us. And that's fine too. But even if you were already remote, it's worth kind of checking and seeing, all right, is there anything we might need to change? Maybe it's not impacting us right now, but is there anything else that's changed for our previously distributed team that it might be worth us checking in on that right now? So I've definitely seen those polarized sides. Another part of the we haven't had time is we're just waiting for things to get back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
Don't count on that one.
So Mark and I have not really discussed this yet, but my thinking is that for the rest of 2020, normal, not normal, right? There's nothing normal about the rest of 2020. Just not going to happen.
Or 2021, because a lot of, like, Google just came out and said they're going to let their employees work remote until at least middle of 2021, I think. So
yeah,
I think
we're going to see more of that.
Year next year.
Yep.
All right, so we are going to take questions in a second. Before we do, just want to give everyone a heads up on some learning opportunities that are coming up. First of all, we do have 2 conferences. They are going to both be virtual, of course, in the fall. Both Star West, which is our largest testing conference, is happening in early October, and our Agile DevOps East conference is happening in early November. So check those out. We are in super early bird, as it's called, so you get the best deals signing up now. I think super early bird for Star West ends this week, tomorrow or Sunday or Saturday or sometime. So get it in soon. DevOps is a little bit further out, I think early to mid-September there. There are some upcoming live virtual classes as well that are very relevant to this conversation, leadership and team-oriented classes. And we are running a special promo at Coveros through August just to get people re-engaged, we'll call it, with training. Now that, as Mark mentioned, we've kind of figured out, hopefully, what our technology is and how to work together. Now it's time to okay, let's get back to making progress and growing and learning and all those things. So we're running a buy one, get one free for over 20 of our classes and through the month of August. So check it out if you get a chance at coveros.com. training.coveros.com/BOGO if you want more information.
And I wanted to add, Jeff, that for those who are here on the webinar, if you get in touch with me, and I'll put this in chat, and you haven't figured out how to use all these tools, I'm running my own remote facilitation course here in about a week. So awesome. I will give you a discount if you reach out to me. I'm going to send that in chat right now. Thanks,
Mark. We appreciate you doing that for the audience. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And we talked about the hub. We are headed to the hub after this is over. The hub now has over 6,000 software professionals in it. It's a place to go and ask questions, get answers to things, just chat with other people about a whole variety of subjects. We're going to be in the Agile_leadership channel. If you're not a member of the hub, you can just go to hub.techwell.com and sign up. It is free. And then you can jump in and join the conversation as well. And then last but not least, before we take questions, I do want to let everybody know that we have planned our next webinar, and it'll be on October 22nd of this year. Steve McConnell, who's written quite a few books on software development and Agile and code, great guy. He just released a book recently called More Effective Agile. a roadmap for software leaders. And we're going to be talking about what that roadmap is that he sees for effective Agile and how leaders can, drive effective Agile in their organization. So, please put that on your calendar and join us for that as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing so we can all talk, and we're going to take questions for the remaining time that we have. Either put them in chat or...
Well, so Pete had one here earlier. I told him we'd talk about it in the hub, but
yes.
Since we've got a few minutes, he was, I think, Pete, you were asking about tools for retros versus electronic whiteboards versus tracking. Yes. So for retros, probably two of the top tools right now are Retrium and Scatterspoke. You've probably come across this if you've researched it. Yeah, all different. Exactly, they're all different. So I know Retrium better. I know the founder, great guy, great company, by the way. Their tool works very well if you have people that are not very experienced with retrospectives. And we've talked about this, so this is not anything bashing the tool. It's designed to support that. So very good tool for that. But if you have experienced Scrum Masters, coaches working with you, Google Docs or Office 365 shareable documents are just as good. It's just, really, you want something that's a blank sheet. So a Google Jamboard, Miro or Mural will work just as well in that case. But if you've got people that are inexperienced, you might want to look at Retrium or Scatterspoke. Johanna, I don't know if you have any more on that one.
No, I'm not. I'm really like Google Docs.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. I still have a bunch of templates in Google Docs. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good tool. So Mike,
Yeah.
Mike asked, would you comment on team members that would rather work in isolation and how to help them become an active and engaged part of the team? You've never run into that before, have you? Technologists? No.
Oh, yeah.
So let me have a conversation with you. No, that one's always interesting, especially for teams that have always been distributed and maybe even have, at least for me, have a history of working with open source, which is more isolated, I find, because open source contributors are usually working outside their normal work to contribute to those projects. So they're used to working solo. They're also usually the same ones that don't want to use cameras. So that's okay. So I try to encourage them and say, all right, you don't necessarily have to do this, but how do you resolve issues? Well, I just share it in GitHub, or I share it on Jira comments or something like that. And I said, how long does it take for you to get a response? Oh, hour to a day. It's like, wouldn't you want that response a little sooner? Maybe. I said, why don't you ask a question and stand up and see how that goes? It takes a few times sometimes to get them to do that. Or they might answer somebody else's question. And that's where I will pull them off one-to-one, not confront them in a meeting, but say, this is the collaboration part. This is where things go faster if you collaborate. It doesn't always work, but sometimes the light bulb goes off. And you can do that. Johanna might have some other techniques.
So I actually asked the team to measure their cycle time for the last few stories or features or something. And inevitably, the person who wants to work alone has the longest cycle time. And I explain, long cycle time is not good or bad. It's just, it is, unless you want to do something about it. And when they say, well, I don't want to be the one dragging down the team, that's when I say, so what would work for you in terms of collaboration? Are you willing to pair? Are you willing to swarm? Are you willing to mob? Are you willing to turn on your camera? Are you willing to, to do a little, I don't want to call them lunch and learns because I don't want them to happen over lunch, but are you willing to do a little training of everybody else for 20 minutes in your team once a week, so that other people understand what you know and right, all that other stuff. So I offer them options. Pete says if you struggle more than 30 minutes, bring it to Slack for help. I actually like to ask teams for working agreements. How long will somebody stay stuck? And my thing is 15 minutes. If I cannot find, I can Google with the best of them. If I cannot find the answer in 15 minutes, I need to go ask for help. And this goes back to the culture you have in the organization. If your managers think that asking for help is a sign of weakness, that's not going to work. But Agile teams need to be able to ask and offer help.
Or another element that I've come across is you ask, hey, can you spend a little time doing a little mini tutorial? Oh, I don't want to put together slides and all of that. Well, could you write a short description of the topic and just do a Q&A? That sometimes works. And then when the person talks far longer in the Q&A than anything else, and they get praise for, wow, you were so knowledgeable about this, then they go, all right, maybe there's something I can do to help. So it's just about sharing the knowledge. The thing I always try to find is what brought these people into IT, and it's usually not money, it's not fame, because we don't always get that. It's usually they really want to do a good job. They really want to build something that makes a difference. So you have to show them, hey, if that's your goal, here's some ways to get even further along to meet that goal.
Awesome. No, that's great feedback and great interaction from the audience as well. I think we're about out of time. Don't see any other questions. Lots of comments though, so definitely check out the chat. Yeah, and as mentioned, we are going to head over to the hub. So anybody that's interested in chatting more, we will be over there for a bit. So join us over there. And thank you everybody for coming, and particularly thank Johanna and Mark for spending their time with us here today. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you, and be safe.
Be safe. Take
care,
everybody.
Thank you.